Emma stood still, her heartbeat slowly returning to normal as she surveyed the room. The tension that had gripped the restaurant moments ago was beginning to dissipate, but there was no denying the weight of the moment. The shot had missed Jack by mere inches, and had it not been for her, he would have been in grave danger. But the strangest thing happened next. The chaos was still unfolding, with security rushing to check every corner of the restaurant. But Jack remained frozen, his eyes locked on Emma. He had always been the type of person who commanded respect without asking for it. Yet in that moment, he seemed utterly powerless. He had come into the restaurant expecting to enjoy a quiet meal before a big business meeting. Instead, he found himself shaken, unable to take his eyes off the waitress who had just saved his life. He had always thought of the people who served him as nothing more than part of the background, just another cog in the machine of his lavish world. But Emma had shattered that perception in an instant. Jack's mind raced. He had no idea who she really was or what her story was, but there was something about her that intrigued him. Most people in her position would be terrified, scrambling for answers, unsure of what to do next. But not Emma. She stood there with a calmness that defied the chaos around her, her eyes sharp, taking in every detail. He knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a simple waitress. As the room slowly returned to normal, Jack stood up, his legs feeling a little unsteady. He looked at her again, searching for an explanation, but Emma remained silent, watching him with quiet intensity. I don't know what to say, Jack finally muttered, his voice low, almost reluctant. Emma simply nodded, as if acknowledging his confusion without offering any further explanation. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Jack saw something in her that he had never expected: strength, intelligence, and a quiet dignity that no amount of money could ever buy. "I'm just doing my job," Emma said softly, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. Jack raised an eyebrow. He had expected her to downplay the situation, to act humble, to perhaps deny the reality of what had just happened. But she didn't. She was matter of fact, as if saving him from a life-threatening situation was no big deal. "Your job," Jack repeated, as if testing the words in his mouth. "That's an impressive job you're doing." Emma simply shrugged, her expression unreadable. Jack felt a pang of guilt, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. He had always prided himself on being able to handle any situation, any problem. But here he was, staring at a waitress who had just saved his life, and he had no idea how to thank her. He was used to people doing things for him, to people offering him praise or favors in exchange for something. But with Emma, it felt different. There was no sense of obligation in her actions. She hadn't saved him because she expected anything in return. She had acted purely on instinct, a calm, calculated move that had saved him from a disaster he hadn't seen coming. Jack's thoughts were interrupted as one of the security guards approached him, his expression serious. "Mr. Harrison, everything is secure now," the guard said. Jack gave a brief nod, but couldn't take his eyes off Emma. She had moved to another table, serving another customer as if nothing had happened. It was as if the whole world could be falling apart around her, and she would still be unfazed. That was when Jack realized that, in some strange way, Emma was the most powerful person in the room. She had saved him, yes, but she had done so with no expectation of praise or reward. She had acted because it was the right thing to do, and that made her more remarkable than anyone Jack had ever met. "Thank you," Jack said quietly, almost to himself. Emma didn't hear him, or if she did, she didn't acknowledge it. She simply continued with her work, moving gracefully from one task to the next. Jack stood there for a moment longer, his thoughts racing. There was something about Emma that he couldn't quite put into words, something that had shifted the way he saw the world. He had always looked at people as tools, as means to an end. But Emma had shown him that there was more to life than power and control. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt something he couldn't quite identify. He didn't understand it yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He wanted to know more about the quiet waitress who had saved his life. Jack found himself in the back of his car, heading to his next meeting, but his mind wasn't on the business deal waiting for him. He couldn't shake the image of Emma, standing calm and collected in the midst of chaos. For the first time in a long time, Jack was unsettled. He had met hundreds, if not thousands, of people in his life, billionaires, CEOs, world leaders, but Emma was different. She was not impressed by his wealth or status. She didn't treat him like everyone else did. She didn't offer him empty pleasantries or try to gain anything from him. She had simply saved his life, without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. It was a level of integrity and humility he hadn't encountered before. As the car sped through the streets of Manhattan, Jack found himself thinking about her. Emma Stevens, the quiet waitress with the eyes that seemed to see through him, as if she knew him better than anyone else ever could. He tried to push the thought aside. He had a meeting to attend, deals to make, but somehow he couldn't forget her. The way she had acted, the calmness in her demeanor, the professionalism with which she did her job, it was all so effortless, so natural. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration. A part of him, the part that had always been in control, wanted to know more about her. What was her story? Why had she chosen to work as a waitress? What did she want from life? It wasn't like Jack to care about someone like Emma. He had always surrounded himself with people who were either there to do his bidding or to admire him from afar. But Emma didn't fit that mold. She didn't care about his money, his power, or his reputation. In a way, that intrigued him more than anything else. When Jack arrived at the meeting, he tried to focus on the task at hand, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Emma. He found himself checking his phone more than usual, half expecting her to message him, though he knew it was unlikely. He had no idea what he was hoping for. A thank you? An explanation? Maybe he just wanted to hear her voice again, to understand what made her tick. The meeting dragged on longer than he anticipated. He was speaking to an important investor, but all he could think about was the waitress who had stopped a bullet for him. He kept wondering, as the conversation continued, what would happen if he went back to the restaurant? What would he say to her? How could he thank her? But more than that, how could he explain to her that she had changed something inside of him, something he hadn't even known needed changing? As the meeting ended and Jack stood up to leave, his mind was still racing. He couldn't just let it go. He needed to see her again. He needed to understand her, to find out what made Emma Stevens tick. He made a decision right there, in the middle of the conference room. He would go back to the restaurant. Not for business, not for a meal, but for Emma. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew he had to find it. He was no longer the same man who had walked into that restaurant hours earlier, expecting to have an ordinary evening. Something had shifted. Something deep inside him was calling him back to that place, to her. As Jack stepped out of the building and into the night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building within him. He had made billions, conquered industries, and built an empire, but this was something entirely different. He was about to pursue something that had nothing to do with wealth or power. He was about to pursue something that could change him forever. The city lights of Manhattan gleamed brightly as Jack's car pulled up to the restaurant once again. His pulse quickened, a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty building within him. He had never been this unsure of himself. It was a feeling he wasn't accustomed to, but it was there, gnawing at him as he stepped out of the car and made his way toward the familiar entrance. The last time he had walked through these doors, he had been the one in control. Today, everything felt different. His thoughts kept drifting back to Emma Stevens, the waitress who had saved his life without hesitation. The way she had acted, so calm, so composed, made him question everything he had ever known about. Strength and power. Was it possible that someone like her, someone so ordinary in the eyes of the world, could hold more power than a man like him? Jack pushed the thought aside. He wasn't here for a philosophical discussion. He was here to find out more about her, to understand her, to know why, after all these years of building his empire, he had never felt more intrigued by anyone. As he entered the restaurant, his eyes immediately searched for her. The place was busy, as always, but there was no sign of Emma yet. He felt a pang of disappointment, but it didn't last long. He sat at the same table where he had been earlier, the table near the window, and waited. The minutes dragged on, and just as Jack began to wonder if she was even working tonight, he saw her. Emma appeared from the kitchen, walking briskly to a table in the back. Her uniform was crisp, her hair pulled back neatly, but there was something different about her tonight. Maybe it was the way she moved, more confident than before, or perhaps it was the way she seemed to glide through the chaos of the restaurant, unaffected by the noise or the bustle. Jack's heart raced as he watched her. She was everything he had imagined, and yet, in some way, she was completely different. There was an aura around her that he couldn't quite place, a quiet strength that seemed to come from within. She wasn't like the women he was used to, glamorous, polished, always seeking his approval. Emma didn't need approval from anyone. She was her own person, and that was something Jack found deeply compelling. As Emma approached his table, Jack stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. She looked at him, her expression neutral, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him feel like she knew exactly what he was thinking. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice steady, as though nothing had changed. "I didn't expect to see you back so soon." Her words were polite, professional, but there was an edge to them, a quiet acknowledgement that she knew exactly who he was, and more importantly, what had happened the last time they had met. Jack cleared his throat, trying to shake off the sudden nervousness that had settled over him. "I had to come back," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I owe you an explanation." Emma raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting this. She stood still for a moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to read him. "There's nothing to explain," she said finally. "You don't owe me anything." Jack shook his head. "I do. I've never met anyone like you before, Emma. You saved my life, and I can't just walk away without understanding why." Emma's expression softened just a fraction, but she didn't immediately respond. Instead, she sat down across from him, placing her order pad on the table. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't need anything from you. I did what anyone would do. But if you're really here to understand, you're going to have to ask yourself why you're searching for answers." Jack blinked, taken aback by the question. He had expected her to be grateful, to offer some kind of explanation for her actions. But instead, she had turned the conversation back on him. It was unsettling, yet somehow exactly what he needed. Emma wasn't going to give him easy answers. She was challenging him, forcing him to confront something inside himself that he hadn't realized needed confronting. "I guess I don't really know," Jack admitted, his voice low. "I've spent my whole life building an empire, focusing on power, control, money. But when you stepped in and saved me, it felt different. Like everything I've been chasing doesn't matter." Emma nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. "That's the thing about power," she said softly. "It can make you feel invincible, but it's not the only thing that matters in life. Sometimes, the most important moments come from the quietest people, the ones who don't need to be seen or heard to make a difference." Jack looked at her, his mind racing. He had always believed that success was defined by wealth, by influence, by the ability to control. But Emma had shown him that there was more to life than that. She had given him a glimpse of something deeper, something that money couldn't buy. And for the first time in a long time, Jack found himself wondering if he could change. If he could be more than just the man he had spent so many years becoming. Jack sat in silence, the weight of Emma's words lingering in the air between them. He had always been a man of action, a man who made decisions swiftly, with confidence. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt uncertain. He had spent so many years chasing after success, believing that power and control were the ultimate goals. Yet here he was, sitting across from a waitress who had shown him something he couldn't buy, something he had never even considered. He had saved him, not because he owed her anything, but because she was the kind of person who did what was right, regardless of the consequences. Emma's calmness, her ability to see beyond the surface, had rattled him in ways he didn't fully understand. She wasn't asking for anything from him, and yet, she had given him more than anyone else ever had. Jack leaned back in his chair, looking at her. She was the same as she had been earlier, composed, focused, seemingly unaware of the impact she had on him. But there was a shift in her, too. She wasn't just the waitress anymore. She was something more. Jack realized then that it wasn't just about her saving him from a potential threat. It was about how she had made him see things differently. It was about how she had broken through the walls he had built around himself, walls that he had constructed to protect himself from vulnerability. He had been living in a world where everything was transactional. If you wanted something, you paid for it. If you wanted respect, you earned it. But Emma had shown him that there was another way. "I'm sorry," Jack said suddenly, his voice quieter than before. Emma looked at him, her expression unchanged. "For what?" she asked, her tone soft, yet curious. "For not seeing it before," Jack replied. "For not seeing what really matters." Emma didn't answer right away. She simply studied him, as if trying to gauge whether he truly understood what he was saying. "You don't have to apologize for anything," she said at last. "We all learn in our own time. It's just about being open to it when the time comes." Jack nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words sink in. She was right. He had spent so many years chasing after the wrong things, believing that they would bring him fulfillment. But now, he realized, true fulfillment came from within, from the kind of person you chose to be, not from what you could accumulate. I've been so focused on the wrong things, Jack admitted, more to himself than to her. I thought power was everything. But I see now that it's not. It's the connections we make, the people we choose to be around. It's about being true to who we are, not what we have. Emma gave him a small smile, a knowing look that seemed to say she had always understood this, even if he hadn't. It's a hard lesson to learn, she said quietly. But it's one worth learning. Jack sat there for a moment, letting her words wash over him. It was strange, he thought, how one encounter, one brief moment in time, could shift everything. He had come to this restaurant expecting to check off another item on his to-do list, but what he found was something far more valuable, something that could change the course of his life. You've changed the way I think, Jack said, his voice sincere. I don't know if you realize how much that means. Emma's smile softened, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She knew. She had done what she had set out to do. Help someone see beyond the surface. Help someone understand what truly mattered. Jack had been searching for something for so long, and now, sitting here with Emma, he realized that what he had been searching for wasn't a business deal or another achievement. It was the realization that the power to change wasn't outside of him. It was within. And for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was ready to embrace that change, ready to become the person he had always wanted to be. Not because of what he could control, but because of who he could be. He stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Thank you, he said, looking at Emma with newfound respect, for showing me that there's more to life than just winning. Emma didn't say anything, but her smile told him everything he needed to know. As Jack left the restaurant, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face it differently. He was ready to be more than the man he had been. And it was all because of one quiet waitress who had shown him that the true power in life came not from control, but from connection. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Jack. He couldn't stop thinking about Emma and the way she had made him question everything he had thought he knew about success, power, and even himself. His mind wandered back to that conversation, the quiet understanding between them, and the way she had managed to see through him in a way no one else ever had. He had always been a man who controlled every situation, who calculated every move, but with Emma, it felt like all that control had slipped away. For the first time in years, Jack wasn't sure what his next step should be. He had always had a plan, always known exactly where he was going, but now, the path ahead felt unclear. Despite the uncertainty, there was a sense of freedom in it, a sense that maybe he didn't need to have everything figured out. Maybe it was okay to let go of some of the control. One evening, several days after their last conversation, Jack found himself back at the restaurant. He had come to see Emma again, not to thank her. He had done that already, but because something had shifted inside him, and he felt the need to understand more. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew he needed to find it here. As he entered, the familiar sounds of the restaurant, the clink of plates, the hum of quiet conversations, welcomed him. But this time, there was something different about it. The energy felt more grounded, less hectic. And there, in the corner of the room, he saw Emma. She was working, of course, but there was a calm about her that stood out even more today. Jack hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach. It wasn't like him to feel nervous, especially not after everything he had built. But with Emma, everything felt different. He walked over to the bar and sat down, waiting for her to notice him. It didn't take long. Emma looked up, her eyes meeting his with a brief flicker of recognition. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice steady. "Back again." Jack nodded, his usual confident demeanor softened by a new vulnerability. "I was hoping we could talk." Emma's expression shifted slightly, but she didn't say anything. She simply motioned for him to wait as she finished serving a customer. Jack watched her, noticing the way she moved, how she navigated the space around her with purpose. There was no hurry in her steps, no sense of rushing. She was in control, and yet, she didn't need to show it. When she returned to him, she took a seat across from him, leaning back in her chair with a quiet ease. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her gaze thoughtful. Jack took a deep breath, his hands resting on the table as he looked at her. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began, his voice more serious than usual. About power, about control. And I realized, I've been so focused on building something, on being someone, that I lost sight of what really matters. You showed me that. Emma didn't interrupt him, but her eyes softened slightly. She was listening, truly listening, and for the first time, Jack felt like someone understood him in a way that no one else ever had. I don't know how to fix everything, Jack continued, his voice filled with uncertainty. I've spent my whole life climbing, thinking that success was the only thing that mattered. But now I'm not so sure. Emma smiled faintly, her expression warm but still composed. It's not about fixing everything, she said gently. It's about understanding that there's more to life than what you've been chasing. Success is important, but it's not everything. There are things you can't control, and that's okay. Jack nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had always thought of himself as someone who needed to have everything under control, someone who could bend the world to his will. But Emma had shown him that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is let go. I'm not sure what comes next, Jack admitted. But I want to find out. I want to do better, be better. Emma leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving his. You're already on the right path, she said quietly. It's not about being perfect. It's about learning and growing. And that's what makes all the difference. Jack smiled. A small, genuine smile that he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in a while, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't sure where this new path would lead, but for the first time in years, he was okay with that. He didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to keep moving forward. Thank you, he said, his voice full of sincerity. For everything. Emma smiled back, her expression soft and knowing. You don't need to thank me, she said. Just keep going. Jack left the restaurant that evening with a lighter heart. The city felt different now, as if the world had shifted just slightly, enough for him to see things in a new light. He still had a long way to go, but for the first time, he was willing to walk the path, whatever it might bring. He knew that change wasn't going to happen overnight, but he was ready to live a life that wasn't just about control, but about connection. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most powerful thing of all. The weeks that followed were a turning point for Jack. He had been going through the motions of his usual life, meetings, business deals, late nights, but something was different now. Emma's words still echoed in his mind, like a gentle reminder that there was more to life than the empire he had built. More to life than just power, control, and success. Jack couldn't help but think about her. She had changed something inside of him, and he wasn't sure how to process it. He had come to realize that for so many years, he had been chasing the wrong things. His wealth and influence had never brought him the satisfaction he had hoped for. But Emma, she had shown him something far more valuable. She had shown him that there was a kind of strength in vulnerability, that there was power in letting go of control and simply being present. It wasn't a lesson he had expected to learn from someone like her, but he had learned it nonetheless. Jack found himself coming back to the restaurant more frequently, not because he needed to find answers, but because he wanted to be around her. He had never expected to feel drawn to someone like Emma, but there was something about her that made him want to be better. He hadn't been ready to admit it at first, but he realized now that he was looking for a change in how he saw the world, a change in how he saw himself. One evening, as Jack sat at his usual table, waiting for Emma to finish serving a customer, he reflected on how far he had come. He had started with a desire to be the best, at any cost. But now, he was beginning to understand that being the best wasn't about winning all the time. It was about making a difference, about connecting with others in a meaningful way. When Emma finally came over, she smiled at him, her warm, unassuming presence a stark contrast to the frenetic energy of the city outside. "How are you tonight, Mr. Harrison?" she asked, her tone still professional, but there was a quiet familiarity between them now. Jack smiled back, a genuine smile that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "I'm good, Emma. Really good." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his answer. "Good? You're not the type to settle for just good." Jack leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting hers. "I used to think I had to be perfect, that everything had to be exactly right. But I'm starting to realize that maybe just being good, being content, is enough." Emma regarded him for a moment, as if weighing his words. "That's a big shift," she said, her voice soft but knowing. "But it sounds like you're on the right path." Jack nodded. He knew she was right. He didn't need to have all the answers anymore. He didn't need to control every outcome. What he needed was to be present, to find peace in the quiet moments and embrace the uncertainty that came with them. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Jack continued, his tone sincere. About power. About control. I used to think those were the things that made life worth living. But now I see it's about connection. It's about making a real impact, not just in business, but in the lives of the people around you. Emma smiled at him, a gentle, approving smile. You're starting to get it, she said. It's about the people you touch along the way, not the money or the title. The best way to make a difference is by being present for others, by showing up when it matters. Jack looked at her, a sense of gratitude swelling inside him. I don't know what the future holds, Emma, he said quietly. But I do know one thing. I'm not going to chase after the same things anymore. I'm going to do better. For myself and for the people I care about. Emma's expression softened. That's all anyone can do. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time. As Jack sat back, he realized how much he had changed in such a short amount of time. He had gone from being a man obsessed with power and control to someone who understood the value of vulnerability, connection, and self-awareness. He had Emma to thank for that, though he wasn't sure he could ever fully express his gratitude. All he knew was that he was a different man now, a man who was ready to face whatever came next with an open heart and a clearer vision. And as he looked at Emma, he knew he was ready to take that next step, whatever it might be. Jack had been back to the restaurant several times since that evening, and with each visit, something within him continued to change. It wasn't that the world around him had dramatically shifted, it was more that his perception of it had. He saw the people who walked through the doors now in a different light. Not just customers, not just people to impress or serve, but individuals with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of silence that were often overlooked. He found himself thinking about Emma more often, reflecting on their conversations and the way she had opened his eyes to things he had never truly considered. It was clear now that his earlier pursuit of power, of winning at all costs, had been an empty chase. There was more to life than just building a legacy. As the weeks went on, Jack found himself becoming more intentional in his actions, more mindful of his impact on those around him. He began making small changes in his business, shifting the way he treated his employees, focusing more on their well-being than just the bottom line. He started taking time to truly listen, to hear the people he interacted with, instead of just talking over them or brushing them aside. It wasn't a perfect transformation, but it was a start. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Jack found himself sitting at the bar of the restaurant, watching as Emma moved gracefully between tables, handling the bustling atmosphere with an ease that amazed him. It had been some time since they had spoken outside of the usual pleasantries. Jack had always respected her, but now, he felt a deeper admiration for her, for the way she carried herself, the way she navigated the world with a calm that he had never truly appreciated before. As Emma made her way toward him, her eyes met his, and Jack felt that familiar feeling of anticipation. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it was as if just being in her presence had a calming effect on him. She gave him a small smile as she approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward, though. It was as if there was an unspoken understanding between them now, something that didn't need words to be felt. Hey, Jack, Emma said, breaking the silence. What's going on? Jack smiled, feeling more comfortable in her presence than he had in a long time. Just thought I'd stop by. It's been a while since we really talked, hasn't it? Emma raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. You're right, she said, leaning against the bar. You've been keeping to yourself, huh? Jack laughed softly. I've been trying to figure things out, he said, the words coming out more easily than he expected. You know, about everything. About life. And I think I'm starting to get it. Emma tilted her head, curiosity in her gaze. Get what? Get that it's not about control, Jack said, his voice steady. It's about letting go, about trusting the process and being present. I've been so focused on having everything figured out that I never stopped to look around and see what was really happening. I've been missing so much. Emma nodded slowly, her expression softening. That's a big realization, she said quietly. But it's a good one, and I'm glad you're starting to see it. Jack looked at her, his gaze steady. You've changed the way I see things, Emma. I can't thank you enough for that. Emma smiled, her eyes warm. You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep going, keep learning. That's what it's all about. Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him as he heard her words. He had spent so much time trying to control everything, but now he understood that life wasn't about control at all. It was about understanding, about growth, about connection. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was on the right path. Emma stood up, giving him a nod as she moved toward another table. Jack watched her for a moment, admiring the way she carried herself, the way she interacted with the world around her. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. She was calm, grounded, and real. And for the first time in a while, Jack realized that he wanted to be more like her, not in the sense of becoming someone he wasn't, but in the sense of embracing the things that really mattered. He was no longer interested in the superficial things that had once consumed him. He was ready to focus on what truly brought fulfillment, the connections he made, the people he cared about, and the way he could impact the world in a meaningful way. Jack stood up and walked toward the door, a new sense of purpose settling in his chest. He didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he was okay with that. He was on a journey of his own now, one that was about more than just success. It was about understanding the deeper layers of life, and he was ready to see where it would take him. Jack's routine had changed, and it wasn't just his work habits that were different. He found himself more present in his everyday life, taking the time to notice the small moments he used to overlook. The weight of his past obsessions, wealth, power, status, had started to fade, replaced by something deeper. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the old habits crept back in, reminding him of the world he had once felt so comfortable in. But he didn't let them control him. Not anymore. He learned to take a step back, breathe, and reflect on what really mattered. One evening, Jack walked into the restaurant again. The familiar sound of the door chime greeted him, but tonight, it felt different. There was a calmness in the air, a stillness that reflected his own sense of peace. As he approached the bar, he caught sight of Emma, moving effortlessly between tables. She was talking to a customer, her calm demeanor never wavering, as always. It was easy for Jack to forget that she wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who had changed the course of his life without even trying. He knew now that he hadn't just been drawn to her because of the way she had saved him. It was the way she lived her life, so grounded, so aware, so full of quiet strength. He had been searching for something for so long, not knowing what it was. But now he understood. It wasn't about chasing after the next big deal or climbing another rung on the ladder. It was about finding balance, connecting with people, and appreciating the journey. Emma turned and noticed him standing there, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Hey, Jack," she greeted, her voice warm but not overly familiar. "Back again." Jack smiled back, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Yeah, I couldn't stay away," he replied, his voice genuine. "I was hoping we could talk." Emma raised an eyebrow but nodded, gesturing for him to take a seat. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. She simply made space for him to speak. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Jack began, his hands resting on the table. "About everything. About how I've been living, what I've been chasing. And I've realized something." Emma's expression softened, but she didn't rush him. "What have you realized?" she asked. Jack took a moment, collecting his thoughts. "I've spent so much of my life focused on the wrong things. Success, control, all of that. But it never brought me what I thought it would. I thought that if I had it all, I'd feel fulfilled. But it's not about that. It's about the connections we make, the people we care about. It's about living with purpose, not just for the next paycheck or the next deal." Emma nodded slowly, as if she had already known this about him. "I think you're finally seeing what matters," she said quietly. "It's not about having everything figured out or having it all. It's about learning, growing, and being true to yourself. And more importantly, being true to others." Jack leaned back in his chair, taking in her words. It was strange, he thought, how much she had helped him understand in such a short time. He had never expected to find guidance in a place like this, from someone like Emma. But here he was, feeling more at peace than he had in years. "I don't know what's next for me," Jack admitted, his voice steady. "But I do know this. I'm not going to chase after the same things anymore. I'm going to focus on what truly matters. People, connection, making a difference." Emma smiled, a knowing smile. "You're already on the right path, Jack," she said, her voice filled with quiet encouragement. "The fact that you're realizing this is the first step. Jack looked at her, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He couldn't fully explain what it was about her, but there was something about the way she saw the world that made everything seem clearer. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't think I could have done it without you." Emma didn't respond right away. She simply gave him a look, one that said more than words ever could. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he had found a sense of purpose, not just in his work, but in his life. As he sat there, talking to Emma, he realized that he didn't need to have all the answers. Life wasn't about finding a perfect solution. It was about being open to change, learning from the people around you, and finding peace in the moments that mattered. Jack didn't know where his path would lead, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready to embrace it, ready to live fully, without the need to control every aspect. And he was grateful for Emma, for the way she had helped him see the world in a new light. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be real. And for the first time in his life, he felt like that was enough.